Hello and welcome. In this video, we are going to take another look at our memory demo, which is also part of our fundamentals demo. This video will focus on how to update strings inside of a function. Again, this video is part of a larger series of videos that focuses on some of the details of the Java programming language and how it might differ from other languages you have used. So to begin with, let's go ahead and take a look at the two functions we're going to be working with in this particular video. I'll try to leave them in the comments section for this particular video, but you'll notice that I'm going to be working with strings this time, as opposed to the earlier example where I was looking at integers. And the idea here is that what happens if I pass an input string to a function, can I or can I not update it inside the function? Well, to begin with, we'll take a look at our two functions here. You'll notice that both of them, again, are public statics, and that means that they can be called without creating an instance of our memory demo. And more importantly, you'll notice that my return value for my update string is void, which means that it's going to accept no return value, whereas for my update string with return, it will, in fact, return a string. So let's go ahead and get started here. We'll go ahead and try to make some sort of change to our input string. Again, there's going to be a couple of different things that we can do here. I'm going to go ahead and start off by looking at some of the fields properties associated with our string. And specifically what we want to do is we want to take a look and see, are there in fact any functions that will allow for us, or fields or properties that will allow for us to be able to edit the input string. And if you notice as you go through this, conspicuously missing is a get or a set. If you scroll down a little further here, you'll see that there are in fact no setters that will allow for us to set any of the values in a string. And so your first inclination might be in fact to do something like this, where we say our input square brackets 0 is going to be equal to, and we'll just simply specify that it is a letter A. In other words, basically whatever string gets passed to us, then we will simply change the 0th element to the letter A. And right off the bat here, you'll get a warning that says that it is an array is required, but a string is found. And so your first concern here, or your first thought should be, well, this worked in other languages that I am familiar with, particularly in C, where we thought of a string as a special character vector, as well as in other languages where we could access and edit an individual element within a character vector. This is, however, not the case in Java. And so continuing that for just a second, let's dig a little bit deeper here, and we'll again look at our input variable. You'll notice that there are some functions that will help us perhaps. You can see where we could actually get, for instance, the index of a particular element in the string or in the input string, but you'll notice that all these have return values that may or may not be all that useful. We do have the ability, for instance, to get a substring, but you'll notice here that we do have the ability to replace a character. And so let's give this one a shot here. We're just going to pick this replace function, and what we're going to do is we're going to specify that for whatever reason we want to replace the character A with the character B. Now, you would think this would work, but there's a problem in that this function requires, or rather expects, a return value. And so you'll notice here that I have to then assign the results of this operation back to the input variable. And again, this might work, but what you'll see in just a second is that the input variable itself, since it is a copy, then any changes we make inside this function, in fact, will not be translated to outside the function. So before we do this, let's keep our example a little simpler here, and that what we want to do, for whatever reason, you simply want to change our string to something like hello world. And what we'll do then is we'll attempt to make a call to our update string from our main in hopes that this will then update our input string. To accomplish this, well, we just simply go back and grab one of our earlier templates here. My demo switch was a good example. And then I'll simply make a copy and paste of this and change our demo switch then to update string. And I'll simply start off by creating a local variable. And I'm going to assign the value welcome to Java to it. And then to prove what I'm doing here, I'm going to do a system.out.println. And I'm simply going to print the value of the input. I'm going to follow this up with a call to my UpdateString function. And I'm going to pass to it the input, and I'm going to follow it up with another system.out.println. At this point, we should have a working demonstration of what I'm wanting to show you. So let's go ahead and build this. Let's come over to our command line. I'm going to go ahead and clear the screen here. I'm going to change my switch to my update string. And you can see here that it starts off with welcome to Java, and then we also get back welcome to Java. So let's make just a little more noise here. We'll start off by having the little extra here. We're going to call this then outside. And then in the inside of the function, then we'll make another note here. So there we go. And then in the inside of the function, we'll start by simply printing the value that was passed to our function. And then we want to see, well, does it in fact get updated? And we build this one more time. And with a little more noise, it should be clear exactly what's going on is that outside of our function, we see the value welcome to Java. Sure enough, there's welcome to Java. And inside welcome to Java, that doesn't change because we haven't done anything to it. But I changed the value of my input variable to hello world. And sure enough, we see the hello world when we print it again on line 79. But then outside, we get our welcome to Java again after the function has returned. And essentially what this tells us is that a copy of the input variable is made for our update string, and then any changes that we make inside of our update string will in fact not be carried through back to our main. So let's give this another shot. Let's take a look now at our update string with a return value. And what we'll do here is we'll actually borrow some of the code that we already have here. We'll just simply bring this down, but we are going to do the extra step of creating an additional variable that will also be a string. We're going to call this our results variable. We're going to initialize it to an empty set of quotes. And then what we'd like to do is we'd like to add our hello world to the end of whatever gets passed to our function. So unlike before, where we have our input equal to hello world, what I'd like to do is I'd like to say results plus equals our input. And I'm going to go ahead and add a new line in here. And then I'm going to have our hello world. So the idea here is that the input gets passed to the function. We add a new line onto it, and then we add our hello world. And again, for this particular example, I could actually leave this as just equals. But since we initialized our results equal to an empty set of double quotes, I'm going to show you how to simply append then the results variable. Again, much like the earlier video, when I would go ahead and take a second to go ahead and demonstrate what my results looks like inside of our update string with return. And then more importantly here, we want to make sure that we are in fact returning our results. Again, none of this should be terribly surprising to you, except in this case, what we're going to do is we're going to return a string back to our calling function. So let's go ahead and get our calling function set up. In other words, let's go ahead and get our switches set up. We can actually go ahead and borrow a significant amount of our code from the earlier example by simply just changing our switches. So in this case, it's going to be UpdateStringWithReturn. And then simply remembering to go ahead and call the correct function here. So in this case, it's going to be UpdateStringWithReturn. We also want to have a separate variable for our results here, and we're going to simply just initialize those to empty double quotes, and then we'll use that to capture then the return value from our UpdateStringWithReturn. And then the last thing that we want to do to demonstrate this is simply display then the output of the results variable. Now, I could go through the extra step of also displaying it prior to calling the function, but as you would guess, it's just going to be an empty string. At this point, then let's go ahead and build it. And then let's change our switch to our UpdateStringWithReturn. And you can see here that outside it simply says welcome to Java, as we would expect. Inside the function, it also says welcome to Java. That's essentially what we see on line 94. And then we append onto that a new line as well as hello world. And you can see here that there is, again, for the inside input, says one last time, welcome to Java. But then we also append the hello world onto the results. And it's probably hard to see this, so why don't I take just a second to add a couple of extra print lines in here for this particular example. I'm going to add one right here, and probably one more after we have our results, just so we can more easily see then what is actually going on. And you can see here then that inside the function, we have our welcome to Java. Sure enough, that's what's on line 94. But then our input is duplicated here because no changes have been made to it. But more importantly, we have now appended the hello world onto the end of the input. And then outside the function, nothing changes, of course, with the welcome to Java message, but the return value is what is captured inside the results. Now, what I do is I encourage you to take a look at this particular example for a little bit. You should not surprise you very much, other than the fact that we are, in fact, returning a string. That's not something that you will have necessarily done when you were working with C, although that is definitely very feasible in C. But in this particular case, what we're doing is we're returning a string using an input argument for our function that is also a string, and then essentially making some sort of manipulation to it. So what are we ultimately going to get from this particular example is the fact that in our Java, our strings are immutable, which means that they cannot be changed. They are effectively going to be recreated, which is why in the first example, no matter what I would do, in other words, try to access individual elements in the string, even though you would consider that an array of characters, well, turns out that we cannot, in fact, make any changes to it. Now, we'll talk about why and how we can get around some of these things in later videos. But for right now, what you want to recognize is that if you want to update a string inside of a function, you have to make sure and return a string as an argument. So hopefully you found this video useful. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, don't hesitate to reach out to me, and thank you for watching.